Uh, so React context, I'm recording it so that this one, and I'll record all of them today so that if we don't get everything done, then you'll be able to look them over the weekend and refresh your stuff. So the four we're doing today are not ones where you need to have complete and total understanding of it. You just need familiarity, and mostly they're there to provide you with a process you go through in order to add this into your application should you find you need it. The main purpose of context that we're studying here is so that you can do your user management. So the main thing I'm trying to get by the end of the day is that you can go and take an existing product or your final project and add user management to it. So that's the primary goal that we have here. And again, I'm mostly just wanting to get the process down. But let's talk about context. Context is useful even not within user management, like in this one where we're doing it for shopping cart. But again, you'll have every app will have probably one or two contexts, but very rarely will you have more than that. Okay, so let's start with Rakaya. What is the purpose of context?
It is to share global variables across components.
Yep, that's exactly it. I mean, that's really enough said. That's all you need to know. If you have data that needs to be shared across many components in your application, context is a good place to put it. It's very, very, very uncommon to be in that situation, though. There are only a few things where you need to share that data across everything. If you have a little hierarchy of components, that's usually not a good place to put context. Instead, you pass the props down as normal props. Okay, good. Noah, what values can you put in your context?
So the values we initially sought by default values. It can be any values, can be array, can
Yes.
be variable, object, but we start with the default.
Correct. So the values main thing here was to just remind everybody that you can put any type of value you want in context. A string, a number, an array. Usually you'll put an object in your context. And your object keys will be various things that are related to each other. Like in the shopping cart example, you'll have a key that is your shopping cart contents, a key that is functions. You'll have functions. Usually when you have context, you have state variables, and then you have functions that manipulate that state. So, for example, the cart, and then functions to add something to the cart, to remove something from the cart, and so on. So yes, anything you want, most often it's an object. All right, Caroline, how do you create context and make it available?
We create context by using the create context method and passing it default values.
Good. And then how do you make it available so that other components can use those context values?
We wrap it in our in the main component that manages our app with the cart context provider property.
Good. So every time you create context, it has embedded inside of it a component called provider, and that provider needs to be wrapped around all of the children that are going to have access to that value. So you can actually control which part of your application has access to your context by wrapping the provider around them. Usually you'll just put that provider around your entire app so that your entire app has access to it. All right, then Noah, I'm on the other side now. I want to make use of those context values. How do I access them?
You're gonna create a use context hook.
Yes.
Put it at the top.
Yep.
Since it's hook. It's the
Yep.
main hook.
Yep. It's a hook. use context, and so you call the use context hook, and that returns the current value of the context values. And then usually you'll return an object from your context values will be an object, and then you'll destructure the ones that you need out of it. So most of the time it'll be a destructuring call where you just destructure out the values that you need from your context. All right, Rakaya, when do you use context? That's kind of the key to the first one, isn't it?
So we would use it when we want to access, like we want multiple components to access a variable. Like if we need the one that we did the exercise, the cart. So
Yep.
when we copy the cart, or if we want to set a theme, light and dark theme.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and so you use it whenever you need, and you need to really be certain that you need it globally. You use it when you want to have data available globally throughout your entire application is a good time for it. Another case, in a small number of places, it can save you prop drilling, and so you can use it in a small case to save prop drilling. But generally, its primary use is for global data. Now, it turns out that, do you remember in React Query how you set up React Query? You have to put the browser router around your app in main TSX.
Yeah,
Any guess why?
to be a global thing.
Because browser router is a context provider, and it has a routing state that it keeps globally. So browser router is implemented using context. And so now that's why you have to put the browser router around your app so that all the components in your app have access to the route information, to the route hooks.
So that the browser router has the context embedded in.
Yes, yeah. If you go through the cleanup stuff where you create your own provider and stuff, browser router is a context provider. Okay. All right. They just named it browser router. And in our case, if you do the cleanup, we name it cart provider. So anyway, name it whatever you want. All right. Okay, cool. Let's do the implementation. We need to make sure we're done by 12:30 when the graduation ceremonies start.
Also,
So-
our graduation for the front end.
For the last group,
Oh, for the
for
last.
the group that has been in the post program, they're graduating today, and that's at lunch.
Do they get certificate?
Yeah, they'll get a little certificate and a t-shirt, and we'll have lunch and so on.
T-shirt.
So that's at 12:30, and so I need to make sure I get this all done before then. And then also take a moment to introduce user management.
Mhm.
So I'm starting from the starter files that you have. And I'm just going to quickly implement the exercise. I've already created the cart context file, and inside the cart context file, I need to just create my context. So we create a variable. We start it with uppercase because we need to use it as if it were a component. So when we call use context, or sorry, create context, it returns a component. So we have to start our context name with an uppercase so we can use it as a component. This is one of those rare times where we have to actually start our variables with uppercase. So
You need to export content.
oh yes, I'm going to need to export it, and I'm going to say create context. Okay, so it's in React. So I just did that so that the VS Code imported it for me. So I've got the create context there. I've got it named create context, and I do this, and then I export it. Now you'll see that if you hover over here, it says create context expects one argument, and I didn't pass it. So create context expects to receive as its argument the default value of the cart context. Okay, so a lot of people do null. I find it more convenient if you actually put in the actual an actual default value. So also I need to tell the context what the data type is of the value it has. So my TypeScript will help me out. And the way we do that is using generics. We put the type in here, like a cart value type or whatever I want to call it. So I'm putting this here. So this is telling me I have to go and create my type. So I need a type for my context, cart, which I'll just call cart value. And I'm going to want this to have my, it's going to have the cart. And the cart in what we're doing is just going to be an array of products. So it's just the array of items that are in the cart. So I have to import product.
It's just the array of product items that could be in.
That are in, not could be, that are in the cart. Okay, so cart is the array of items that are in my cart. That's what that is.
But we don't have anything in the cart.
I know. This is a type. This isn't a value. This is just a type.
Okay.
Okay, this is a type. All right. So then I'm going to need a function for this purposes that just adds something to the cart. If I were fleshing this out, I'd add one that does that removes an item from a cart, and maybe that clears the entire cart or saves it to disk or something, and maybe purchases the cart. You can add things in here, but for now we're just going to do add to cart for demonstration purposes, and it needs to be a function. If I'm going to add something to a cart, then obviously I'm going to want to add a product to the cart. So I'm going to have that be the parameter to my function. This function, add to cart, is going to accept a product as, when I call it, I'm going to pass it the product that I'm adding to the cart. Okay, so there we go. So I'm getting there. So
Can I ask a question? Well, what's the difference between generic like this or putting cart context colon and cart value? You see like how an object would put the type?
yes, this is generics. We don't go into generics very much here. I just teach you how to use them, and I'll talk a little bit about them in one of my lectures and give you some reading material on it. So I don't want to take the time to actually explain how it works. But what you're doing is you're telling create context, this is the type of value that your value is going to be of this type. So TypeScript now knows that this context value has that type. So that's how we're using it here. Up here, we're creating a type, and here we're saying this field, this type cart value is an object. That's what the curly braces mean. And it has two fields, one named cart, one named add to cart. The carts, the type of the cart is a product array. The type of add to cart is a function that takes one parameter. Okay. So that's how you use those.
So it's similar to putting the cart context colon and
Similar. It's a little bit different than that, but it's kind of it's the same idea. I'm telling you mean I could put cart context colon cart value.
Yeah, like here.
Yeah, but that's not the way that it's intended to be done. It doesn't really work quite right syntactically. So because cart context is actually not a cart value. Cart context is an object. It's a React component. It's not even an object. I'm sorry, it's a function. It's a React component. So cart context, what gets returned here is a function, a component, and the component has a value that's of type cart value. So this is telling TypeScript about something about this function that is different than just the return type. Okay.
Using a React component.
Yep. Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna pass in. So I have to pass in a default value. Well, since this is the value type right here, then I need to pass in an object that looks like that for the default value. So so here's my object. Now my error changes, and it says this empty object is not assignable to a cart value because it doesn't have cart or add to cart in it. So see, I have to fill out my default value. So I'm going to have an object. I have to have two fields, cart and add to cart. Those are the two values I have to have. Now, what's a good value for cart? Default value. It's an array, so a good default value is an empty array. And this has got to be a function. And what's a good default function?
So empty parameters.
There's really there's not something I can just say empty function, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do that.
So I have to make one up. And so I've discovered after much head scratching that I can actually, if I do this, this declares a function that does nothing. Okay, so this is basically an empty function. And I have to put it here because I don't want to define the function here. I want to define this function somewhere else. But I have to create context a default value. So, and when we actually set our value, we'll put a real function here instead of this fake empty function. So that's the only reason for this. It's a fake empty function that keeps the create context happy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In our cart value type, our function returns void, but in the object, the function returns undefined.
Yes. So that's why I said this took a lot of head scratching, because my first thought was, oh, okay, I'll do this. Well, that's not legal JavaScript syntax.
Yeah.
You can't return void. Void is a TypeScript invention that says don't return anything. And if you go and do some research on JavaScript, you'll discover that a function that doesn't actually return anything under the covers will return undefined. And so this is basically the same way of saying I'm returning nothing. Okay. So it's, I have to pass in a real arrow function here. And so a real arrow function has to return something. It can't return void. This is just a way to tell TypeScript, I don't want you to even pretend to return something. I don't want a return statement at all in your function. And so anyway, it's a little bit of
Head scratch.
yes, it took me a while to figure this out. And anyway, I don't know what more I can say about that, Rakaya. Sorry, it's maybe you
Makes sense. I mean, when we have our functions that don't return anything, we do get undefined. So
that's true. Yes. All JavaScript functions will return a value. That's just the way JavaScript works. All JavaScript functions return a value. If you don't have an explicit return statement, it returns undefined. Okay. So that's what you do is you have to say return undefined. Okay. That was a fun question. All right. So now that I've done this, I need to go now. Let's now go and use it. So I'm going to go to my app and I'm going to wrap. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my app with my cart context provider. So I put this here, pull that down to the bottom. Well, I guess I'll have to cut and paste. Okay, it didn't want to let me drag. All right, so there we go. It imported the cart context for me. And now you'll see the error here is that I have to add the property value. So I need to say value equals something.
There's a default value, right?
Yeah, no, this is now the real value. This is the actual value that it's going to have. And so what we're doing here is we're providing the actual value of my context. So this is the value that's happening, that maintains what's going on with the state. So I have to have a real function and a real cart and everything. Okay. So here, if I hover over it, it says that, it doesn't like onity expressions. Well, then let me do like an object. Okay. Now I say, okay, I'm going to pass the value an object. And now it's complaining. It says, wait a minute, this doesn't have cart and add to cart. So I have to provide, so TypeScript knows that the value has to be of type cart value. So I need to put something in there that is of type cart value. So in other words, I need to pass in a cart, which is an array of products, and an add to cart, which is a function. Okay, so I can't do this because those aren't defined. But what I'm going to do is cart. Usually when you have context, your context values are kept in state. So the context value is kept in state, and then and then your functions manipulate that state. That's usually what you do when you do context. So I'm going to create state for the cart.
And you said, and the functions or children components manipulate that state?
the functions inside of your cart value manipulate the states. Okay, so I can do this. Oh, I have to import use use state. I have to import product. Okay, so now that's working. So my cart here is just my state. It's going to start out as an empty array, and then when I call add to cart, I'm going to add something to it. Okay.
It's like a, the use state, it look like an array when it's like a for loop. You start with an I0. The I0 is assigning the state. Each time the state is changing, is like when I equal 1, do this. When I equal 2, do this.
Okay. All right. So let's.
Nine for loop.
Okay. So let's. Now I need an add to cart function. So let me declare a function. Add to cart, and it has to take a product. Product void, so that it matches the signature on here. So now you see this guy's happy. So now I need to figure out how to implement this function. Well, how do you add something to state?
By using this.
My state is a cart array, and I want to add something to it. How do you do that in a way that works correctly?
We need to create another instance of the.
Okay, const new cart equals. If I'm going to add something, I can use concat, or I can do the spread and put the product in
No.
like that. Okay.
Okay.
And then I have to call the state setter with the new value. Okay, so this is something that we've done a lot, so you should recognize this. So I'm just going to
You're adding to it.
I'm going to add the product to the cart. Whatever the cart is in there, I'm going to add the product, and then I'm going to call set cart with the new values. Why is that looking
Because-
complicated to you?
I didn't realize that line 15 is creating a new instance with the spread operator.
Yes, because the square brackets here means create a literal object or a literal array. Create a new instance of an array. That's what the square brackets mean.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the thing is, I thought we're gonna create, we already have we create an empty cart, and then we can do the cart dot push.
Yeah, you can't do that, because then if you use cart.push, then when you call set cart, this won't be different than the old one, and so you won't refresh you won't get you won't schedule a re-render.
So
Remember, we did this.
the new cart is a type cart, right?
Yes, yep, it has the same type as a product array.
Okay.
Okay, all right. And then I can, just for fun, I'll put it in here to make the
Yeah,
code a
that
tiny
one I
bit
was like,
cleaner.
yeah,
Okay.
that was should-
All right, so that's the same thing.
yes.
Those two pieces of code are identical. So now I've got that, I've got it there. Now I'm ready to start using it. So let me run my app. Here's my app right here.
It's really easy to use.
You'll see I have the cart here with a 0 in it. So now how do I use it? Well, first of all, I'm going to go to the header, and here is where the little badge is done with the count in it. So I want this to be the number of items in the cart. So instead of 0, I want to put the length of the cart. Okay. The problem is I don't have my cart. How do I get the cart?
Using use context.
I get it from context. Const. I'm going to destructure the cart from my use context, and I have to pass it the cart context like that. And then I go this, add import, and there it is. Okay, if I go switch, now it's still going to be a 0 because there's nothing in my cart. But let's go here and implement the add to cart. So I'm going to go to product details. Now, when I call my handle add to cart, right now all it does is does the alert that says it was added to the cart. I want to get rid of this. I don't want the alert anymore because I find that annoying to the user. Instead, I just want to add it. Add it and go back to the home page. So I want to call add to cart and pass in the product. Okay, but I can't do that because I need to get add to cart. How do I get add to cart?
Use context.
I get it from my context. Const. I'm going to destructure add to cart from my context from use context. And I'm going to pass it in cart context. Okay,
Oh, that's way easier.
so
than
that's it.
props.
It's done.
Way easier than props. This is why I tell you I like
It's not
It's
like
not, it's a
props.
lot of work if you want to just use it for passing from the parent to the child. And it's disaster if you're trying to just pass something from the parent to the child. It really is. It's a tremendous amount of work for no gain. If you're just trying to pass props down from one parent to a child, just pass the prop. That is by far the easiest and safest way to do it. Okay. If you do context all the time, try it. You're welcome
that
to
was
try
the-
it, sir. Go out and try it. Spend the weekend, go back to some of your exercises and see how much work it takes to use context to pass props from your parent to your child. It's a tremendous amount of work. You have to create the context, you have to create the context type, you have to wrap the parent and the component and with the values and the state and everything else. It's a ton of work. And it's so simple to just say, prop name equals in it. So try it. You'll have fun. Okay, so now if I add the ShamWow to the cart, look, I went back to here and my number went up to 1.
Amazing.
See how shift that
I
is?
was struggling to add this one in my project.
Yeah. See how great that is? How simple? Boom, it's done.
Yeah, that's
I don't have to do anything. Boom, up it goes. Okay. Now, in a real app, you would want to, of course, store it to disk and restore it from disk and everything else. Because if I refresh the page, my cart's gone.
Oh,
And then you're going to want to say, if I click this, then you're going to open the shopping cart and show all the things that are in it and stuff
so
like
you need
that.
to create a database
Yes.
cards.
Yep, exactly. Okay, here we go. That's it. So that's the main part of the exercise. Now let me just quickly go through the cleanup stuff.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In your handle add to cart function, there is no parameter on line 31. And we're checking if there is no product. So where is the product coming in from?
The product is in, it's right here. It's in state and it's read in the use effect.
So we don't need to pass sorry, we don't need to pass it as a parameter to handle add to cart?
Well, you could if you wanted. So what I did is I just say, if you click the add to cart button, all I want to do is call handle add to cart. You could change this to say, so that's fine. There's no real problem with doing that. And then you'd add the product as a parameter up in your handle add to cart. But it's just as simple, it's just as effective to do this. Since the product is in state and it's loaded here in my use effect, then I know that product is going to be defined when I get here.
Is it?
And so I can just use state here when I call this function. I can just use state. So you can do it either way. In this way, I'm accessing state here in this function. In the other way, I would be accessing state down here in the handle add to cart when I put it down here. Down here, see, I have to say, and I have to call this with the product. And this product is state. This comes from my state. So in either case, I'm accessing the product from the state. So it's just, do I access it here when I call in my arrow function, or do I access it up inside of my handle add to cart function? And so this is just kind of an arbitrary choice. And the one I made that I thought was the simplest was to just access the state directly up here in my handle add to cart, since I've got it there anyway. So.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Is it because the state product is a global variable, so function can access it, right? It's like a peek to
Well,
outside.
that's-
No, the product is in the use effect here. It's state of the product details. It's product details state. It's not global state.
If you go to the top, you see the state.
Right
Is it
there.
Product, it's in product.
Yes, right here. It's state. This state is local to this component. That's how components.
But the component include, if you go down to see the function on line 31, it's inside the function.
Yes,
So can access the global.
this is inside of the product details, so it has access to all of the. It's a nested function inside of product details, so it has access to everything that's
Has
up here.
access, this is why we.
Yeah,
can access
and
it.
so this actually is in the this function's backpack, if you remember that stuff.
This is why it can
Yeah.
access it.
Yeah, you can access this because it's in its backpack.
But the one from outside cannot access what is inside. the
Correct.
function.
Correct. Okay, so just clean up. When I do this, I find it kind of not very aesthetically pleasing. I don't like to have to always do this and remember how to get that out and what context I'm using. And I just kind of think it's a little nicer to clean it up a little bit. And you'll see that a lot of NPM packages do the same thing. So what I want to do is I want instead to just, instead of having all of this stuff here, I just want to say cart provider like that. And I don't want to have to maintain the value here in my app. If I have 2 or 3 contexts, then I'm going to have do all the state management here in app. And I feel like this puts too much code and responsibility inside my app. I want my app simple.
Yeah.
So I really want to create a cart provider and move all this management here inside of the cart provider. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to create export function cart provider. So I'm creating a component, and it's essentially going to return cart context dot provider. Sorry, like that. Okay, now I have some work to do here, but this is the idea. I'm trying to just make a cart context provider that does all of the provider work for me. And so since I put the provider in here, I have to set its value. And then I have to, so I just as well go here and let me take this. I'm just going to now start doing cut and paste. Cut, paste. I'm going to cut all of this stuff out. I'm going to move this into the cart context so that my app doesn't have to know all about it. And I'm going to put it here. You know, this is just, we call this encapsulation. I'm just taking all of the information about the state cart and how I have to manipulate and everything and putting it all inside of my cart context file so that it's all in one place. Okay. All right. Then there's one last thing I have to do. Let's see. Let me import this.
Oh, it's a really hack.
Import that. Get rid of this. Now I can get rid of these guys. Okay. And it's complaining because there's
Children thing.
my cart provider does not declare that it takes children, but I'm passing it children. So now I need to remember how you do children.
Oh.
So now I need to go to my cart context and I need to declare it so that it takes children, which is a React node. And I'm going to just say children. Boy, do you remember how to even do React anymore? Props. Yep, like that.
We're laughing now.
That's right. And then I put the children here, and that's where I'm going to render the children.
Yeah, we see a lecture,
So,
Robert, everything.
There's that.
I know, Robert.
Everything looks.
Everything looks like it's just.
Simple. Yeah. Okay, so now I've got that much done. That's good. I'd like to clean up this use context here, though. I'd prefer not to have that. So I'm going to go add a hook, a custom hook. I'm going to write my own hook. Export function use cart, which is going to return a cart value. And it is going to call value equals use context of the cart context. And then, whoops, I guess I need to import that.
Oh my.
And then I'm going to return this.
It's good.
So this is all optional, just something I like to do. I think it makes my code, whoops, that was a mistake.
It added something.
Okay, so I've done that, and now I can go here.
But
What?
where's that cart context coming from?
Right here, it's the same context. I didn't change this.
Oh.
It's right there.
Okay.
Okay. So now I can come here and I can change this. Instead of use context, I can just say use cart. And I have to import it. Get rid of the stuff that I don't need anymore. So there's that one, and I go into header and do the same thing. I'm going to, instead of use context, I'm going to do use cart.
And you're just gonna call the function.
And get rid of those two. Whoops, this is going to be use cart. And then I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, so that's nice and simple. If we go back, now my code looks, I think it looks a little simpler. Okay, certainly the app looks simpler. It doesn't have to worry about how to maintain the cart state. That's all in the context. So this one got a little more complicated, but everything else is simpler. Yes, ma'am.
Would you please be able to go through the cart context just to point out, like, because somehow it's
Okay, cart context,
just,
this file.
yes, please.
Okay, I'm importing the stuff I need. I'm declaring the type of value that my cart context returns. I'm creating my context, and with create context, giving it a default value, which is some dummy values that I don't really care about. And then I create a cart provider, which is the thing that I really want people to use. I don't want them to use cart context.provider. I want them to use my cart provider.
Oh.
My cart provider is a component that takes children. It has state, which is the cart. And then it has a function add to cart that adds a product to the cart and causes a re-render to happen. And then I have my cart context provider wraps the children. So I can now just use this cart provider in my app. And then I've done a custom hook, use cart, which returns the cart value, and it's the same as use context.
That's amazing how you can access the global variables.
Okay, so now if I go back, I'll just show that it still works. If I add this guy to the cart, then you see it goes up to a 1.
But I don't like how when you refresh it goes
It's
back
the
to-
cart provider that's confusing me. Okay, that's okay.
Okay, cart provider is just a component I made up. And it is doing the cart.provider and embedding the value. This is exactly the same what used to be in app.tsx. I just moved it inside of this component.
Okay.
I took it out of app and I put it in this component. Okay, so it's providing the value and it's rendering the children inside of it.
Oh, thank you.
So Robert, is it what I understand? It's better to do all your application inside the app.tsx, and then when you want to use functions or component, you can divide your application into components, right?
It's usually best to keep your app TSX very simple. All it does is the routes, nothing else. Okay, so that's why I wanted to take all the code for the cart out of here and move it into the context, because I like keeping this thing simple. Then it's easy to understand, easy to change my mind and manipulate and work with things. So all it has is the routes. Now there's one thing here that's happening that I don't, that's unfortunate, but it happens. With Beat, it says fast refresh only works when a file exports only components. Fast refresh means that when you change a file, that the browser reloads. Beat is managing that. And apparently if you have both components and regular functions exported from the same file, it can't do the fast update right. So it'll make updates slower. I probably don't care about that, but the way I address that is I just move the hook into a different file, which I call use cart, like that. And then I'm just going to take this function here, move it into here. And then I have to import all the stuff that I need. Oh, I need to export this type. Then I can import it here.
So by moving it to a TypeScript file, we say, oh, the TypeScript will take care of it.
No, it's just a normal file. What I'm saying is it's a TS file because it doesn't contain any JSX.
Create
Oh.
context.
Okay, so now there's that. I have to change the import here because now it's in a different place. It's now in use cart. And then I have to go to my header and make the same change. It's now in
Goodness, there's a lot
use
of
cart.
things to keep in
Oh, there's
mind.
not that much. TypeScript tells you everything, what to do. It's really simple. Okay, so now I don't have that warning anymore, and I can go back and everything still works. Add to cart goes up to 2, so on. Okay. One last thing, I find it sometimes useful to, use context can return null. Oh, it looks like it doesn't in this case. Depends on how you do it, but if you do, sometimes I do this value equals, and then if there's no value, then I know that I'm not inside of the provider chain. Use cart must be used inside cart provider. So I'll do this sometimes. It looks like this probably wasn't required, and then I'll return the value, but it's there. Okay, so that's it. That's the exercise. The main purpose here was just to familiarize yourself with what context is, not to make you an expert. I want to make you an expert in React, state, events, and JSX, not necessarily in context. So it was just to introduce you to the concept, give you the mechanism you're going to use to do it, because you might end up doing this in your final project, maybe once, maybe you'll just go and take what's in this exercise and copy paste it, which is perfectly fine. But there you go.
You can use it with like, right? When you have like, you have like a heart symbol for like on it, right?
Yes, you can use it for favorites as well. Yeah, for favorites or liking. Yep, you can do it for that too, because that often is needed in multiple places in your app. So it's good to keep that globally.
I like position.
Yep. Okay.
Position, absolutely.
Any questions on this exercise? Perfect timing because we have our celebration in 5 minutes. So,
I have a question.
oh, go ahead, quick. Yes.
The reason why we're putting our cart provider component in our app.tsx, because it needs to be like in the parent component. Like we do not put it in main because it needs to be in the parent.
You could have put it in main.
Oh, it would still work.
Yeah, you can put this in main, just like you do the browser router. You can put it here. You can put it here instead around this browser router, cart provider. There's that is fine. There's no problem with that.
Shouldn't it go around browser router, since in our app.tsx it's around the routes?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure it's necessary. Could. I don't know that it makes a difference because the here. Yeah, I'm not sure it makes a difference because the browser router itself does not access our context. Only our components access only our app. Only the stuff in app accesses the cart provider. So it really only has to go around this one. So you can put it in the order of these usually doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
So if this was calling use context or calling our use cart hook, then it would need to be this order. But since that doesn't happen, then you could do it in the other order as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are all different choices you can make. Okay.
And use context can be used anywhere, right? Like if it's inside.
Yes, but if you don't use it inside of if you don't use it inside of your provider, then you will it won't work. It won't give you the values.
I'm gonna try to use it in all
Okay.
public catalog instead of using props. I'm gonna try to use it.
Okay, give it a shot. All right, so that's it. Oh, dang it, I was gonna talk to you about user management, so I guess we're not quite as far along as I'd hoped. I have just a couple minutes. I'm gonna release user management. And maybe what I'll have to do is come back and talk to you for a minute right after lunch. User management is, yeah, I'm gonna have to do this right after lunch and talk about it. I don't want to. So we got a couple minutes. I'm gonna do it right now. So user management is the term we use for managing registration and sign in and sign up. For registration login, that is user management. And there are three pieces of that. One is registering the user. So this is when the user registers, they come and they sign up, they give you their credentials. This is my username and my password. And this is when they sign up to your application. Okay. Authentication is when they come and they log in. They say, okay, I want to sign into your site. Okay, so that's authorization, or sorry, excuse me, authentication. Registration is sign up, authentication is signing in. There's one other thing we have to do with registration, and that's authorization. Authorization means that we are going to make sure that we only give you data that you have, that you're allowed to have access to. So if I sign in, I don't want to start seeing Noah's content. I only want to see my content, not Noah's content. So that's authorization. Authorization is how you determine what content the current user is allowed to access. That's authorization. So there are three separate pieces to user management, and they come in. This exercise does a three-step thing where we go through user registration, and you learn about how to do registering, signing someone in. Then the next one is we do authentication, and there's a piece on authentication. And then there's authorization, and we do a piece on authorization. Okay. And then that is, so we're going to go through this exercise in three different steps. Now, it's too much of an overload if I wait until the very end to do all three of those at the same time when I do my Q&A. So even though you're only going to turn in your exercise at the very end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 hour on each one. So at 2:30, I'm going to come and do a Q&A on registration. I don't care how far along you are, I'm going to do the Q&A. And then at 3:30, I'm going to do the Q&A on authentication. I keep saying those two backwards.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard.
And then at 4:30, I'm going to do the Q&A on authorization. Okay. So you'll have 1 hour in between each one. You may not get it all done. That's okay. At the end of the day, what I want to have is for you to have enough information that you can go and add user management to your own application. And I thought I had maybe it's in a guide.
So have registration, authentication.
Yes.
Registration
I
the
think
first time.
authorization is going to be the
The
hardest.
first time, right?
Registration, authentication. So I authenticate that you really are who you claim to be. And authorization is I tell you, give you what you are authorized to have.
Okay.
Content.
Okay, I thought that there was
Bless you, Rukaya. I saw you sneezing.
User management right there. There it is. Here's a guide that I put together that tells you all the steps you have to go through if you're adding user management to a project. And so it's in the guides.
It's a table.
It's in the guides. It's under full stack projects. So, but it's there. And this is what you'll use in order to, so at the end of those three steps, we'll have gone through it all, but then I've consolidated it all down into adding user management, following this with this guide right here, and it tells you what steps to go through. So, but that's my goal, is to get to the point where you can follow this, understand what you're doing, and add user management to your final project. Because most likely you're going to want user management in your final project. Okay, so I'm not too worried about making sure you're experts in user management when we do these exercises this afternoon. So that's why I just kind of rushed through them 3 phases, and you get as far as you can and do the best you can. If you want to refresh on it, go back and watch the video. Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.